Our last topic for this semester is about climate change, its causes, and its effects on society. Here are our lesson objectives. You have to create an advocacy campaign that tells how community help in the existing problem about climate change. And also, you have to develop a plan on how the community can help in mitigating the hazards caused by climate change. Later, you will know what the term mitigate is. So, what's the difference between weather, climate, climate variability, and climate change? Weather here, it is the temperature, humidity, precipitation, cloudiness, and wind that we experience in the atmosphere at a given time and a specific location. Climate naman is the average weather over a long period of time within 30 to 50 years in also a specific region. Climate variability, this refers naman yan to the natural variation or the differences in climate that occurs over months to decades. So it may reach decades, but not as much as 50 years. So El Nino, which changes temperature, rain and wind patterns in many regions in over about 2 to 7 years, Abe. It is a good example of natural climate variability, and it may also be called as natural variability. And so, what is climate change? It is the average weather over a long time period, reaching about 30 to 50 years in a specific region. What are the causes? At its most basic, climate change is caused by a change in the Earth's energy balance. So, may imbalance na sa homeostasis of the Earth. So, how much of the energy of the sun that enters the Earth and its atmosphere is kung pila ang ma-release back into space? The Earth is gaining energy as we reduce the amount of solar energy that is reflected out to space. Just like, for example, for people gaining weight, if there is an imbalance between calories and nga ginatake in and the calories nga ginapagwa. Since the Industrial Revolution started over 200 years ago, human activities have added very large quantities of greenhouse gases or the GHG into the Earth's atmosphere. Ang mga greenhouse gases nga ni, they act as a greenhouse. That's why they are called greenhouse gas. Kaya act sila as greenhouse or in layman's term, the blanket or windshield that traps the energy from the sun and also the heat rather than dapat gina-reflecta back to space or let yeah gina let go ta pabalik dapat sa space. And when the concentration of greenhouse gases is too high, too much heat man ang matrap sa earth, and the earth's temperature rises outside the range of natural variability. So mas nagiging mainit siya than normal. And there are many greenhouse gases, each with a different ability to trap heat, known as ang ilang global warming potential, and also a different half-life sa atmosphere. Ang mga greenhouse gases are sometimes called climate-active pollutants. Greenhouse gases are sometimes called again greenhouse or climate-active pollutants because most have additional effects, most notably on human health. So here, as you can see, carbon dioxide or the CO2 is the greenhouse gas responsible for the greatest amount of warming until sa subong sa present. And carbon dioxide accounted for 82% of all human-caused greenhouse gas emissions in the US sang 2013. Ang majority of carbon dioxide is released from the incomplete combustion of mga fossil fuels, example coal, oil, gas, and used for electricity production, and also transportation and mga industrial processes or ang sa mga factory. Together, these three activities account for more than 80% of the carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere. Other important greenhouse gases include methane, nitrous oxide, black carbon, and others pagid nga mga fluorinated gases, ang mga chlorofluorocarbon. So, although these gases are emitted in smaller quantities than carbon dioxide, they trap more heat in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. The ability to trap heat is measured as global warming potential. Again, global warming potential. As the most common and abundant greenhouse gas ang carbon dioxide or CO2, it has a GWP or global warming potential of 1. So, all other greenhouse gases warming potentials are compared to it. So, ang mga fluorinated gases, for example, they have GWP nga thousands of times nga mas dako kaysa sa carbon dioxide, which is 1 lang. So, meaning that ang pound for pound nga ma-release nga fluorinated gases, they have a much stronger impact on climate change than ang carbon dioxide. So, what are the causes of climate change? It can be due to natural causes or human activities. Ang mga natural causes include volcanic eruption. Ano na siyang first? Volcanic eruptions are one of the natural causes of climate change. When volcanoes erupt, it emits different natural aerosols like carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, salt crystals, volcanic ashes or dust, and even mga microorganisms like bacteria and viruses. Ang volcanic eruption, they can cause a cooling effect sa lithosphere because it's gina-emit niya nga aerosol, they can block certain percentage ng solar radiation nga nagasulod sa Earth. And this cooling effect can last for 1 to 2 years. What happens in a violent volcanic eruption is that nag-release sang ash particles sa stratosphere, and the volcanic ashes, which is may-ara siya sang sulfur dioxide, makombine siya with water vapor. So, ma-form siya sang sulfuric acid and mga sulfurous aerosols. These sulfurous aerosols, they are then transported sang easterly or westerly winds ginadala sang hangin, and volcanoes located near the equator ang more likely makakos ng global cooling. But for 1 to 2 years lang. Because sang pattern sang wind. Volcanoes located near sa north or south poles, they are less likely sila yung nga mag-cause ng cooling effect because ang mga pole wind patterns sa north poles and south poles, hindi siya pareho sa those that are near the equator. And the sulfurous aerosols are confined lang dito lang sa area. It's either North Pole or South Pole. There are several recorded major volcanic eruptions, and I know that you have already been nabasa, it's either nabasa nyo, nakita nyo sa news, no? That has caused a climate change. Ano gid siya, nag-alter gid ang climate sang mga karatig bansa nila, o no? Or in Earth, or sang Earth in general. So, for example, ang Mount Tambora sang Indonesia, it erupted in 1816. It was considered as the largest eruption in human history. Ang Mount Tambora. Tambora. Uh, ang eruption nagkosa sang snowfall sa northeastern United States and Canada. It affected their agricultural lands, nag-lose sila ng crops, and nag-cause food shortage, which leads to increased human mortality. Damo may nagkalamatay. And next is ang eruption sang Mount Krakatau sa Indonesia sang 1883 and Mount Pinatubo sa Philippines sang 1991. Nag-contribute man sila sa cold years sa planet Earth. Next is orbital changes. Ang Earth's orbit, they can also cause climate change. This was proposed by Milankovitch theory. The Milankovitch theory states nga ang Earth, it travels through space around the Sun. Cyclical variations in three elements of Earth-Sun geometry combine to produce variations in the amount of solar energy that reaches the Earth. Kaya depende sa kung diin nadampi ang Earth sa parts ng iyang orbit. Ang three elements that have variations are ang ginatawag nga eccentricity, obliquity, and precession. Eccentricity is ang term nga gina-use to describe ang shape sang Earth's orbit nga nagalibot around the Sun. The impact of the variation is the change in the amount of solar energy kung perihelion, which is around January, to aphelion, which is around July. So, lainay ang solar energy nga nagaka-receive sang Earth. The time frame for the cycle is approximately 98,000 years. So, currently, subong 2022, ang Earth's eccentricity is 0.016 and there is about 6.4% nga increase in insolation from July to January. It is stated nga the eccentricity influences ang seasonal differences when the Earth is closest to the Sun. Of course, it gets more solar radiation. And if the perihelion occurs during the winter, sa may mga four-season countries, the winter is less severe. If ang hemisphere that has its summer, nga kung diin ang Earth is ara siya sa parts ng orbit niya nga lapit sa Sun, mas mainit ang summer, no? Because more solar radiation ang gaka-receive kay kung mas lapit. Next is obliquity. It is the variation of the tilt sang Earth's axis away from the orbital plane. So, obliquity is ang tilt sang Earth's axis. There is a variation sa degree sang tilt sang Earth toward the Sun or away from the Sun. As this tilt changes, the seasons become more exaggerated and the obliquity changes on a cycle taking approximately 40,000 years. So madugay man. And the more tilt means the more severe seasons. So for example, warmer summers and colder winters. So ang less tilt, it means less severe seasons. So pwedeng cooler summers, hindi masyado mainit, and milder winters, not so harsh. Last is precession. It is the change sang orientation of the Earth's rotational axis. The precession cycle takes about 19,000 to 23,000 years, and precession is caused by two factors. Ang may ginatawag nga wobble, so naga-wobble ang Earth sa iya axis, and ang turning around of the elliptical orb of the Earth itself. Kay galain man ang degree sang pag sang pag ah, rotate sang Earth. I mean, it's the same pace, but since nga naglain na ang precession na may pag-wobble nga ginatawag. So it also is related siya sa obliquity. And obliquity affected the tilt of the Earth's axis. Precession affects the direction of the Earth's axis. And the change in the axis location changes man ang pag-receive sang solar radiation, which in turn changes the seasons or may affect man siya sa climate. Next is the carbon dioxide theory. Carbon dioxide or CO2 is added when power and heat are produced by burning fossil fuels such as ang ilang kanina, coal, oil, and etc. Um, Carbon dioxide is transparent, uh, but it is not invisible to infrared. Carbon dioxide, it absorbs actually ang part of the infrared radiation sa air, and it returns that radiation to the ground, keeping the air near the surface, kung diin kita nagatapak, much warmer than it would be if the carbon dioxide did not act like a blanket. So doubling the carbon dioxide raises the temperature actually to 2 degrees Celsius to 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. That's why the more carbon dioxide, mas mainit. So let's go to human activities as a cause of climate change. It contributes to climate change, and the largest known contribution comes from ang burning magyapon sang fossil fuel because ginagamit natin in order for us to function as a society, no? As transportation, sa mga pabrikata, sa industries na muna ginagamit ta. So, this releases carbon dioxide gas to the atmosphere. Greenhouse gases and aerosols affect climate by ang gina-alter niya ang incoming solar radiation and outgoing infrared or thermal radiation that are parts ng Earth's energy balance. Changing the atmospheric abundance or properties of these gases and particles, it can lead to either warming or cooling of the climate system. Yes, may ara nga warm seasons kag mga cool seasons, but when we say climate change, it means abnormal. So hindi pa tag-init pero ginot na, etc., etc., something like that. So since the start of the industrial era about 1750, the effects ng overall human activities on climate change has been ano, ang mas naga-greater tungod sa development sa mga new technology. nga nagagamit sining mga fossil fuel. So the human impact on climate during this era greatly exceeds that due to known changes in natural processes such as mga solar changes and volcanic eruptions man. But human activities result sa emission of the four principal greenhouse gas, which is the carbon dioxide, CO2, or ang mga methane, CH2, ang nitrous oxide, N2O, and ang mga halocarbons. These ang mga halocarbons or the ginatawag man sang iban as pronounced as halocarbons. They are group of gases nga naga-contain sang fluorine, chlorine, and bromine. So gilawag ta kagina nga chlorofluorocarbon or CFC. So these gases accumulate in the atmosphere, causing concentrations to increase with time. So the greenhouse gases mentioned, they are natural gases. However, the high level of these gases in the atmosphere, they contribute to the greenhouse effect. So the increasing amount of these gases, this is due to human activities, and high level of carbon dioxide comes from fossil fuel use sa transportation, building, heating and cooling systems, manufacturing sang cement and mga other goods. Also, deforestation. Deforestation releases carbon dioxide and it reduces its uptake by ang plants kay gapang ano kita gapang illegal logging or gina-exploit naton. And ang high methane emissions, this is related to agriculture, natural gas distribution, and landfills. Why is it related to agriculture? Mas nag-produce kita more methane uh, when we um, nag-aalaga sa mga uh, cows, mga goats, no? Mga those nga ma-produce naton para sa dairy products, para maka-income kita for our own consumption. The more nga alaga ka sang cows, the more nga gataas ang methane, no? And also, mas madamo ang carbon footprint. Also, high nitrous oxide, it is emitted by human activities such as kung magamit sang fertilizer, no? Ang mga halocarbon gases concentrations, they are also increased due to human activity because ang mga CFC ni they are used sa refrigeration, no? Mga as refrigeration agents and other pagid nga industrial processes sa mga factories. Climate change is causing five critical global environmental changes. These are warming temperature of the Earth's surface and the oceans. The Earth has warmed at a rate of 0.13 degrees Celsius per decade since 1957. This is actually almost twice as fast as the rate nga nagwarm during the previous century. And changes sa global water cycle or the hydrologic cycle. Over the past century, there have been distinct geographical changes sa total annual nga pag-ulan or precipitation, with some areas experiencing severe and long-term drought, wala gid nag-ulan, and others naman niya increased annual precipitation or sobra-sobra nga pag-ulan. So, frequency and intensity of storms nag-increase man as the atmosphere warms and is able to hold more water vapor. So, amo na ang cause nga mas nag-intense ang mga storms. Next is declining glaciers and snowpack. across the globe, nearly all glaciers are decreasing. And not only sa area, but also sa volume and mass. 1 billion people living in river watersheds fed by glaciers and snowmelt are thus maapektuhan gid. Next is sea level rise. Warmer water expands, so as oceans warm, naga-increase ang volumes ng tubig which causes the sea level to rise. Naga-contribute man di ang melting glaciers and snowpacks, and also contribute man siya sa pagdamol man sang ulan. And last is ocean acidification. Oceans absorb actually 25% ng emitted CO2 or carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. It leads nga maging acidic ang mas maging acidic ang seawater. These global changes result in what we experience as changes in our local weather and climate. So mas greater variability sang wetter wets, drier dries, and hotter hots. So may more frequent and severe extreme heat events, more severe droughts, more intense precipitation, such as mas severe nga rains, mga winter storms, and hurricanes. Mayroon man higher average temperatures and longer frost-free seasons. May longer wildfire seasons and worse wildfires. Mga loss of snowpack and earlier spring runoff. Recurrent coastal flooding with high tides and storm surges. More frequent and severe floods, of course, due to much more intense precipitation and pag nagtaas man ang sea level due to mga melting glacier and snowpacks. And also because of that, nagworsen man ang air quality. Higher temperatures increase production of ozone, which is a key contributor to smog. No? Smoke with fog bala. And ang pollen as well as naga-increase man ang wildfires. And also longer pollen seasons and more pollen production, which is also a risk para sa mga may pollen allergies. There is a lot that we can do about climate change. In general, climate solutions fall into two big buckets, which is mitigation and adaptation. And increasingly, may mga government and community organizations that also talks about measures to increase man climate resilience. So, what is mitigation? It refers to the measures to reduce the amount and speed of future climate change by ma-reduce kita sang emissions of heat-trapping gases or removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. What is adaptation? Adaptation naman refers to measures taken to reduce the harmful impacts of climate change, or we take advantage ng any beneficial opportunities through adjustments in natural or human system. And what is the part nga nag-talk about sa resilience? It means the capability to anticipate, no? And to prepare, and once nga mag-abot na, to respond and to recover from significant threats with minimum damage to social well-being sa aton economy and the environment. So, that's why amo na ang gina-push sang government and some other organizations, ang resilience. In fact, Filipinos gani, di ba, are labeled as resilient despite of tragedies, right? So, mitigation is essential because scientists agree that The higher the global temperatures rise, the greater the adverse consequences of climate change. Also, if emissions are unchecked, there is greater danger and may abrupt climate change or surpassing ang mga tipping points. No? Mas malala pa than before. For example, ang collapse ng West Antarctic ice sheet, it could lead to very rapid sea level rise. So, may possibility man sa mga mas taas na tsunami o aside sa mga flash floods which is amo na masaka ang sea level or melting ng permafrost could also lead to large release of methane that would further increase the warming through a positive feedback loop nga ma-release ang methane nga gintrap sang ice. If ma-melt na ang ice, so ma-release siya sa environment. That could also lead to increase in temperature. Catastrophic climate change could surpass our capacity to adapt. No? So mitigation is important. Kay prevention is better than cure man balahambal nila. So for example, a recent study suggests that ang heat levels in parts ng mga Middle East countries na pwede siya mag-exceed sa body's survival threshold. So, ang heat sa environment, di na ta mismo nga human body hindi nakasarang. So, unless we should reduce ang greenhouse gas emissions or ang ginagamit natin, uh, we should uh, take the means nga kita mismo ma-make some ways in order for us to use less of these mga greenhouse gas. There are many mitigation strategies that offer feasible and cost-effective ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This may include mga use of clean and renewable energy for electricity production, walking, biking, and mga using low carbon or mga zero emission dili gani nga vehicle. So, also reducing meat consumption. Kaya di ba agriculture can also contribute sa pagtaas ng methane and less flying, aeroplano, uh, changing agricultural practices because the current agricultural practices natin contributes to the global warming because of um, mag-plant ka crops, dira man nagkahalin ang nitrous oxide and limiting dapat deforestation and planting more trees, which our school is already practicing. Ang mga adaptation strategies naman, they are needed to reduce the harmful impacts of climate change and it will allow communities to thrive in the face of climate change. So the impacts of climate change, they are already evident. Ma-feel ta naman. So in extreme weather, more explosive wildfires sa makita ta sa news, higher temperatures pag hindi lang gid siya uncomfortable nga ginot but mainit gid siya. It could also be harmful na sa aton health. And changes in the distribution of disease-carrying vectors, maka-help man na siya. Because ang greenhouse gases persist in an atmosphere for a long time, kag nagatipon, more serious climate impacts would be experienced even if ma-stop na kita sang paggamit sang greenhouse gases. So boom, hindi mo siya ma-feel ang effect agad-agad. Kaya gatiner pa na siya sa aton ozone layer. So cool roofs, planting trees, and air conditioning are all effective adaptation strategies to reduce ang impacts ng rising temperature and more frequent heat waves. Seawalls and restoration sang wetlands, they are both strategies to address mga sea level nga nag-rise, no? And mga emergency preparedness planning, mga disaster risk management, it also takes climate change into account and is one way nga maka-adapt kita to the increased frequency sang climate resilience and the capacity to anticipate kay makaplano na ta. Therefore, since na-anticipate ta, nakaplan ta, ma-reduce naton ang impact when specific yun man nga climate disaster mag-occur. So, the climate and health co-benefits. Although climate change is the greatest health challenge for our century, action to address ang muni nga problema, it has the potential for huge health benefits. So, considerations ang health and equity impacts of various mitigation and adaptation strategies, it can help optimize the health benefits of climate action. So, maka-benefit, may bonus benefit kumbaga when we take the mitigation and adaptation strategies. So, for transportation, climate change, and health, we reduce vehicle miles traveled through walking, biking, and public transit. It increases physical activity, therefore significantly reduces chronic diseases risk and reduces man greenhouse gas emission. So it's like hitting two birds with one stone. Next is energy, climate change, and health. So if we will switch from coal combustion to clean, safe, renewable energy, it is one of the most important things that we can do for our health, man, and for the climate. So for food and agriculture, climate change and health, shifting to healthy diets and local sustainable food and agriculture systems, it will offer significant health, climate, and environmental benefits. And lastly, urban gardening and green infrastructure, climate change, and health. Sa urban gardening or urban greening, or the same lang, it reduces the risk of heat illnesses and flooding. So it lowers energy cost and supports health. And also, ang mga green spaces nga ni, they provide places man to be physically active, di ba? And makasequester pa ang mga kahoy sa CO2, carbon dioxide, mabuhinan pa. And it will improve air quality. Also, mga green buildings or green infrastructure, they can capture rainwater and replenish groundwater. So, amo na ang mga co-benefits nga pwede natin ma-experience when we practice ang mga mitigation and adaptation strategies. So, activities or activity questions will be posted sa Google Classroom regarding climate change.